Hello again. So this video is going to talk about a technique for supporting children in getting to know their own icebergs. It's an extremely powerful concept and set of techniques because it simultaneously supports these four parenting goals. First, it helps get children to behave more as you wish them to whenever you notice that they're not. Let's be honest, the other goals are lofty and good and important, but this is the one that really gets under our skin and it contributes to kind of daily family harmony or not. Two, it socializes the children in the best possible way. We want our children to be liked by others, right? But we don't want them to be doormats or domineering to achieve that end. This technique directly contributes to nurturing a child who likes themselves and knows their value, growing into a true confidence that draws others to them effortlessly. A leader, in whatever way comes most naturally for them. Number three, it contributes to the deepening of trust between your child and you. This is something never to take for granted. Rebellion in the teenage years is natural, but it can reach damaging levels when the child does not trust that you care for them fully. And this lack of trust doesn't just come about when they're teens, it can start as early as infancy. Number four, it leads to the most rapid development of emotional self-control, which is the basis for maximizing their cognitive development, which forms the basis for their school and career achievement. So those are all great things, right? I want to double check that you've drawn a few of your own icebergs and that you had a chance to talk at least once in group or office hours before you watch this. If not, hit pause and come back later. Draw your iceberg daily until you have the chance to attend a group or have an office hours session. You'll be more prepared. Okay, so the technique we're going to learn today is called feelings coaching. Here we go. When you look at your kids, what do you feel? Be honest. We all love our kids, of course. That's not in question. But how do you feel when you look at them, when you're with them? Are your feelings always the same, or is there a variety? How comfortable are you with that? The emotions we experience when we're with our kids can surprise us sometimes, almost as much as our kids themselves do. And make no mistake, when children come into this world, they already have the capacity for all the major emotions: joy, fear, sadness, anger, and disgust. And they very quickly begin developing the others, such as shame or unworthiness, before they even say their first word. Have you noticed how the basic five emotions, joy, fear, sadness, anger, and disgust, four of them we consider to be, well, difficult. Challenging is probably a better word. And as humans, we tend to like challenges. Often that's one of the reasons we have children, because challenges can be exciting. So kids, with everything they have to deal with in terms of growing into themselves, and it's a big thing being a kid. It isn't easy as some people seem to think. There are a lot of developmental tasks and they're not comfortable. They need support when it comes to learning about emotion. Often we think we're teaching our child about the world, and we are, but perhaps even more importantly and subtly, we're supporting our child in remaining present with the impact that the world has on them. And what that impact is, only they really know it. We're here to let them know it's safe to speak their truth about it, to us. And we will be present for them, perhaps helping sometimes, but most of the time, just being a loving witness and trusting that they will figure it out themselves. If we do this well, which basically amounts to caring for our complete selves, our icebergs, and being present for our children while encouraging them to acknowledge what goes on in their iceberg, the children very naturally begin to meet reasonable expectations. That's expectations that are reasonable for their development. And we'll be talking about that in the module on child development. At home, at school, houses of worship, in restaurants, airports, foreign countries, all of that. Now, not every expectation will be met with joy and enthusiasm, and that's okay, because we want our children to be individuals and, remember, honest about the impact things have on them. But more often than not, things just start to go well. Okay, so what is this great technique we're talking about? In the research, it's called emotion coaching, sometimes also referred to as feelings coaching. In the old days, back in the 1950s through the 80s or so, it was called feelings validation. The concept was really pioneered by psychologist Chaim Ginott back in the 1950s. Ginott was a legitimate researcher. His work is cited by some of the papers in the references for this video. Although he wrote an extremely connected and accessible book for parents called Between Parent and Child. It's worth a read if you're interested. I found reading it to be very calming and pleasant. You really feel his energy. Ginott lived from 1922 to 1973. He was a school teacher, a child psychologist, and a psychotherapist, and a parent educator. His books and the books of his students, Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish, who wrote How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, actually a whole series, all those books are very prescriptive. They talk more about how to talk with and to the child. They don't place much emphasis on the parent's awareness of their own state. They mostly just allude to it or sometimes just don't even mention it at all. I believe that's all that kept him from becoming bigger than he was, although he was pretty big. And it's a deficiency that was perfectly rectified by Virginia Satir. I have a video clip of an interview with him. It's part of a larger video presentation that says it's on congruent communication theory. So it sounds like Ginott and Satir probably did meet at some point, or maybe some of Virginia's students put this video together. Anyway, here's the clip.
Communicating with people.
Barbara, I compared what is the difference between my response to a child in psychotherapy, shall we say, and a parent's response in the same situation. Suppose a child came into my playroom and he turned around and he turned over a glass of water. My natural response, without thinking spontaneously, would be, oh, the water spilled, here is a sponge. Now, the principle that I use is, don't say anything to the child about himself. Do not attack his character, do not attack his personality, do not attack his dignity. The principle is, here is the problem, here is the solution. Parents, because of their own upbringing, have a native tongue of rejection, a native tongue of attack. And what we try to do now is to give them another language. And this is a language of compassion and a language of caring. After all, it's as easy to say to a child, the milk spilled, here's a sponge, especially when guest comes. Have you ever seen when a guest comes to your home and spills, shall we say, a glass of wine? Would you say to him, listen, next time if you do it once more, you're never going to be invited. That's the last time that you are in our home. Besides, where were you brought up? In the jungle? Yeah. That's where you belong, you know. Somehow, to guests, we don't talk like this. I always ask parents, what would you do if a guest came to your home and forgot, shall we say, his umbrella? Would you say to him, every time you come to our home, you forget something. If it's not one thing, it's another. Mrs. Smith, I want to live to see the day when you come to my home, you remember to take all your belongings with you. I'm not your slave to pick up after you. Or would you say to her something like a comparison? Why can't you be like your younger sister? When she visits, she remembers to take all the things home. Somehow we know how to talk to guests. My idea is that we need to talk to children the way we talk to guests, meaning protective of their feelings.
So what did you think of that? Long time ago, huh? I don't think his ideas seemed all that out there now. If anything, they're underdeveloped. But what he was talking about was very serious news at the time. The process of socializing children at the time was very punishment-oriented. The idea of providing emotional support was incredibly new. I have another clip of an interview in the 1970s with his students, Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish, who wrote How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, the best-selling book, and it's still in print. It still does really well. They took his ideas a bit further. Up until this point, feelings coaching or feelings validation was considered a psychotherapeutic technique only. I credit Faber and Maslish with making it okay to talk with kids about their feelings in Western society and bringing the technique to parents where it could really do some good.
Welcome back. Oh, am I learning a lot? I'm talking with Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. Adele and Elaine are two working moms who have a lot of ideas to share with us about how to talk so kids will listen and how to listen so our kids will talk, which happens to be the name of the book that they wrote together. But before we get back into our conversation, let's take a look at what several working moms had to say when we asked them what they did to get their children to listen to them.
I use the mom means business voice, which is do it and do it now, and no ifs, ands, or buts, and she knows I mean it.
It's difficult to get my son to listen to me because he's preoccupied. He's either plugged into his earphones or he's on the telephone or just doing something else. And in that moment, he doesn't want to be bothered.
I use reward and punishment method with my son. If he doesn't listen to me, I'll tell him a few times because I don't like hitting him. And if he doesn't do what's expected of him, something that he wants, I just take it away from him.
I don't want to lay the rap on moms, but are we conditioned to talk to our kids so that they don't listen? You were telling me that.
Oh, we are indeed. We have, it's an old tape that plays through. If you remember back when you wanted to tell your mother something, she'd say, Mom, and she'd say, I'm busy now, or I can't hear. Or if you started to tell her a problem, she would immediately move in and give you advice.
Without thinking about it.
Without thinking about it.
Program.
You know, as I was watching these tapes, I thought to myself, that's not just them. That's me and thee, may I say, and you too, and you too.
Give us an example of the wrong way.
Well, do you want to hear me before I learned what Elaine and I have learned? This would be a typical kind of conversation between me and my child. My youngster, Elaine, be my child, okay?
Right.
And she comes home and she says,
I hate Grandma.
that is not a nice thing to say.
Well, I don't care. I hate her anyway.
How can you talk that way? Grandma loves you.
Well, I don't love her.
Listen, that is disrespectful. I don't want to hear that coming out of your mouth again. She is your grandmother.
I don't care. I still don't like her.
That's enough out of you, young lady. I think you better go to your room now.
You're not hearing feelings there, are you? Is that it?
That really is it. And as a result, I mean, look what's happened between us. I mean, is she going to come to me with anything that ever bothers her again?
No.
And haven't I convinced you to love your grandmother?
No.
Can you quickly
I don't
show us
like
the
you
right
either.
way? Show us the right way.
Okay. Well, one of the principles that we teach is when a child has a feeling, it needs to be heard and listened to and acknowledged, not agreed with. People think it means, you know, if the youngster says, I hate Grandma, that you agree and say, well, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. I never liked the old lady myself. It was hell growing up with her. I mean, we're not talking about agreement. We're just talking about hearing what it is that she's saying. And here's the contrast.
I hate Grandma.
Boy, you sound angry.
Yeah.
Something Grandma did really bothered you.
Yeah, well, every time she comes, she only plays with the baby. And, yeah, she always says, hello, sweetheart. Hello, precious.
Oh, and you want her to pay attention to you.
Yeah, and then she brings the baby toys, and then she said to me, when I want to play with it, don't touch it, that's a baby toy. And then she gives me $2 for my bank.
Oh, you don't want it for your bank.
No.
You'd rather have a present like the baby.
Yeah.
Honey, do you sometimes wish it could go back to the way it used to be, when you were the only one?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you told me how you felt.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, is that a clear example of the difference?
Yes, and
Isn't
the
that a
mother
difference?
who has been working all day. The first tendency is to say, you know, what is wrong with you? That's a terrible thing to say. To take that time to really listen. And I'm thinking of all the mothers listening and watching today and thinking, on top of everything else I have to do, working, and then I have
I'm
to
thinking
learn how to
that,
speak
too.
to my children on top of
Well,
it.
you know, if we work, we live in a world that's so regimented and we react
Yeah.
so quickly. Is that a reason why we often don't take the time?
It's part of it. It's also part of the whole tradition we were brought up in of having our feelings denied. It's foolish to feel that way. You're wrong to feel that way. You have no reason to feel that way. You're too tired. Lie down, you'll feel better. Eat something, you'll feel better. But we weren't reared to be in touch with ourselves so that, Eileen, even when we're upset and angry and resentful, we don't even know how to handle that with the kids because we talk, what did the woman say earlier? She punishes the child, or one says she uses her top sergeant voice, you do it now.
When I come down hard on my little girl, it isn't because I want to be mean. I guess I feel like if she's wrong and I don't get her that moment, I'm acting in a way, I suppose, out of fear that she might grow up and something might end up being wrong with her.
Yeah, she'll become a criminal or a thief or a liar or a procrastinator
Or just
something
not a disciplined
else.
Right.
person.
And instead, what we want to do, instead of just coming down hard, is to engage a child's cooperation. How do we engage cooperation? How do we invite it? And that doesn't mean like saying, sweetheart, would you mind taking out the garbage? And then the kid says, well, no, I'm too busy now. And then the mother says, oh, that little brat, to herself. And then when the child comes and asks her something later, the mother says, what is it? You didn't take out the garbage later. So to learn how to have clear, open channels of communication.
Let's deal with kids who don't cooperate. Their rooms are a mess. I mean, we all go through it. The garbage isn't taken out.
Eileen, do you know what worked best for me? I mean, when I was just rapping out these short commands, I was getting nowhere. What really worked best for me when I went back to work was to be able to gather them around and just say, look, I've been coming home, I'm tired, I get angry with you when I see things that aren't done. You get angry because you come home tired and you feel that, you need a little rest time. And yet there are so many things to be done in this house. When we sat down and we made a list of what had to be done and we all scratched our heads and said, how do we do it and who gets assigned to what? And when they were part of the decision instead of my constantly giving them little electric shocks. Do this, do that, do the other thing. When they were part of the decision, when they made the chart and they decided, that was when we began to move forward as a family. And the other way infantilizes them?
What?
It treats them like children.
It does, doesn't it?
It gives orders,
It's like when we give orders and say, you do it or else. Or if you don't do that now, you're going to be in big trouble.
Or you do it because I say so.
Yeah.
And everything that we're talking about today is terribly important to help the working mother, because the more children make choices and the more they can think for themselves, the more mature will be the child whom we leave at home.
You mean I really should say, would you like a half a glass of milk or a full glass of milk? That's a positive
Then
thing.
the child has to think and say, I would prefer a half because, I really don't want to waste milk.
Or to be able to say, listen, this week, do you want to vacuum or do you want to be the one who folds the laundry?
What if there's always a wet towel on the bed after a shower?
You're talking about my house, the wet towel on the bed.
An example.
Oh, an example. What I used to do would come in and say, that wet towel on the bed, darn it, you are going to be punished, and because it's been there 5 times in a row. Instead, to be able to say one word, the towel.
Isn't that nice to be able to, when you're really annoyed about something, you'll be doing no damage. If you yell at the kid and say, you slob, that's like a nice one.
Self-esteem, destruction.
But if I look at you and I say, Eileen, the towel.
I get the message. Actually, your message is a very broad one, and I could probably talk to you for hours, but it is food for thought, especially these days when communication is so important with our kids, teenagers having problems and all of that. Thank you both.
Oh, thank you.
Adele,
Love
Fun
fun
Lane.
being.
So here are some takeaways. Consider the idea that all feelings are okay. Is the having of feelings really what creates problems, or is it the actions that sometimes follow? What about the feelings that people have that are considered bad, such as a desire to hurt someone, a desire to see them suffer? Now, almost everyone has had a mild thought at least about wanting to see someone suffer, and often much worse. It's really part of being human. Thoughts and feelings alone don't make the person. And it's certainly true, some people have those feelings more intensely, and that may be very troubling. However, isn't it more troubling if the feelings are acted upon? As a parent, I want to know when my child is struggling with something that feels big and overwhelming, even terrible. particularly if they want to tell me. I want to be available regularly. Plus, a person doesn't become a sadist out of a clear blue sky. That takes a backup of disappointment, anger, and rage that the person has been trying to manage all by themselves, likely for some time, even decades. So as parents, it's helpful when we welcome the sharing of feelings. Welcome the sharing of thoughts, too, without judgment or the expectation of agreement every time. Number 2, keep in mind that children have all the feelings adults can have. They can, and they do. They just have fewer resources for working with those feelings, for being informed by those feelings. That's the proper role of feelings, by the way, to inform us of how we're impacted so that information can factor into our decision about what to do next. And it all happens in a very energetic and body-based way. We're not getting our mind to be too involved here. And number 3, when a child does something or makes a statement that we consider worrisome or even abhorrent, think the "I hate grandma" statement. Notice your own reaction to the feeling, although keep it private. Tune into the child. There's no pat thing to say, but you must give your attention and listen. I'd like to tell you a little personal story of my own. When I was pregnant with Genevieve, my Matthew was 3.5. I'd been reading up on how young children are impacted by the impending arrival of siblings and how best to support them. I came across an article, or it may even have been in one of the Faber-Maslish books, that said, your child is going to say that they don't want you to love the baby. You must not argue with them. And I was incredulous. Really? My beautiful, kind son is going to say that? No. Well, sure enough, like clockwork, maybe a month into receiving the news, I think we told him at about 6 months, he said, "You can't love the baby." I was surprised. I wasn't as surprised as I might have been because I was prepared. So I said the words back almost exactly as they had told me to in this article that I'd read. He says in a very authoritative tone, which was usual for Matt at the time, "You can't love the baby." And I looked at him and I said, "You don't want me to love the baby." And he said, "Yes, you can't love the baby." Now, he wasn't yelling and he wasn't looking for me to tell him that I would do as he was ordering me to do. I noticed that, but he was emphatic. So I said, "You really don't want me to love the baby." "That's right," he said, and then he dropped the subject. Well, the book had said that there was absolutely no need to engage him further than this on the topic, and to just, if he brought it up again, to keep almost parroting back to him that what he was saying he wanted, and also not to be upset about it. What was going to happen was within a period of time, it was a few days or weeks, and they said he was going to come to the conclusion that I could love the baby, and that he would come to it all on his own, and that it was not necessary, all that was necessary was that I give him the space to come to it all on his own by not having an upset reaction or telling him that he couldn't tell me what to do, or that of course he would love the baby and I had to love the baby, we all had to love the baby. So, and it turns out that's exactly what happened. A couple weeks after our first conversation, and he had brought it up maybe one time in between, I was reading him a story in bed at night like we usually did. And as he closed the book, which I don't believe was about babies or anything, he said to me, he looked at me, he said, "Well, I've decided you can love the baby." "Really?" I said. "Yes, you can love the baby." And I said something like, "Maybe we'll all love the baby together." And he agreed. We didn't really talk anymore about it, but he had come to a decision and he informed me of what that was. The reason given for allowing this process was that the child who's about to become a sibling needs to work it out for themselves that if he gets his way, if he succeeds in ordering his mother not to love the new baby or his father or his parent, that means that she could decide not to love him also, and that this would be unacceptable. So the important thing is that we not explain this to a young child. Young children are mostly emotion. Their cognitive processes are not at all well developed and they're subject to being overwhelmed. They need the space to come to these conclusions on their own, and it takes a little time. And the reason I tell this story is because if I hadn't come across that bit of written wisdom, I absolutely would have told him that I was going to love the baby sister no matter what he said, and I would have thought that I was doing the right thing. And honestly, that would likely have negatively impacted his relationship with his sister, with me, and possibly caused permanent damage in his ability to trust himself. And that is huge. I consider that finding that bit of wisdom just when I needed it one of my many lucky breaks in being a mom. So that's all for now. Don't worry, there's more on feelings coaching coming up. Looking forward to seeing you in a group or two and at office hours, so go enjoy those kids.